It's a pleasure having you here with us today. And I've read a brief about your journey, and it was really inspiring. And it's based on that I've wanted to ask you a few questions about something I think you would be able to answer, having undergone this journey in your life so far. So the first one question that I wanted to ask you is, like, as a doctor and as a professor, you have chosen paths of healing and service throughout your life, and now you have combined these two aspects in your transition towards yoga. So, what was the realization that aided or inspired this transition?
Actually, my having an MBBS degree always creates that uh, sort of wrong impression, which is on the favorable side, of course. I was never a doctor treating patients. My specialization was physiology, and I was teaching medical students and postgraduates who would become medical teachers. So, I was basically into teaching and research. But then the movement into yoga and spirituality and so on was not an abrupt change. It was a seamless extension. The way it happened was that when I was doing my post graduation in physiology, physiology was considered more or less synonymous with a science in which all research is done on animals, by and large. So, but all the same, human research is possible. So I took a conscious decision that after I finish my MD and I'm more on my own, um, my research will be on human beings. Secondly, it will be on a topic which is inspired by the local environment so that it's relevant to the country. Because, if we choose topics which are inspired by what is going on in the West, not only it is irrelevant to us, we'll always be doing second-rate research because we can't match them in the resources and so on. So, there's no point just sort of extending the research that they are doing and which will be second-rate instead of asking any really original questions in the type of things that they are doing. And the third choice that I made was that my research will be by and large low budget so that I don't need huge grants. And as a sort of coincidence, one of the things that I had got into even before I started doing my post graduation was the field of nutrition. And that started like this that when I was doing my internship, there was quite a bit of time available. And I had this itch for writing, not just writing, but writing a book. So I thought, what is the topic which is related to medicine and the general public is interested in? So I zeroed in on nutrition. In that process, I ended up learning myself quite a bit more of nutrition than the doctors generally do, and ended up writing a popular science book on nutrition. That was my first book. Uh, then, when I took this conscious decision to do this type of human research, which is inspired by the local environment, which is low budget. Now, certain types of research on nutrition fit this very well, fit into these requirements. And then once again, what looks like a coincidence, but I think there was a divine design behind it. Very soon after my post graduation and settling down as a faculty member at AIMS New Delhi, I got an opportunity to go and learn some of the nuances of human research on nutrition on a United Nations University Fellowship at the MIT. So I spent 1 year there, got a master's in nutrition, and also worked with Professor Scrimshaw, who was one of the best known in this field of nutrition and working on human beings. So I came back with this and could carry out my resolution. So for more than 25 years after coming back, I came back in 1979. So starting in 1980 till at least 2005, uh, most of my research was on human beings, on nutrition, and inspired by local problems such as, during the fasting season, people consume buckwheat. So what are the effects of this grain on serum lipid profile and glucose tolerance, which is relevant to cardiovascular disease and diabetes, but they would not think of working on buckwheat, puttu, what we call, or things like, everybody was saying that ghee is bad. And it was based on the fact that certain saturated fats had been shown to raise blood cholesterol. But then all saturated fats need not be alike. So I did some research on ghee. Then, egg. Again, there was such a opinion against egg because egg is a high cholesterol food. But then one egg contains only 250 milligrams of cholesterol, which is in the permissible limit of 300. So if the rest of your diet is essentially vegetarian, one egg per day can be acceptable from the nutritional angle. So I did research on eggs in a diet which was otherwise vegetarian, which is the sort of pattern which Indians generally have. So I could stick to this resolve and do this type of nutrition. But then around 1990, what happened was that the field of nutrition in relation to chronic disease started expanding. People realized that nutrition is only one of the several lifestyle factors which are important in relation to chronic disease. So people started looking at lifestyle as a whole. And one of the lifestyles, naturally, which they were looking at was the yogic lifestyle. And in my own life, around 1992, I went through a difficult phase in life. And just to seek some peace of mind, I came to Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. And how it happened was, again, what looks like a minor accident. I was at the peak of one of those difficult phases. And on a Sunday morning, I picked up the newspaper. And those days, we had in the newspaper the daily events column. That was our way of knowing what is going on in the city on that day. So on the top, more or less, perhaps because of the alphabetical order, Sri Aurobindo's name in Aurobindo. That's how they had taken it as. So on the top was Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, satsang at 10 a.m. So the fact that on that Sunday morning I picked up the newspaper early enough in the morning to have the time to come here, I had some sort of vague idea where the ashram is. So I thought, why not go there? I'll find some peace of mind. So I came, and not only I got peace of mind, I was in for a surprise because I generally associated such places with big crowds, unpunctuality, not being very clean, and a lot of hypocrisy, religious rituals and ceremonies going on. There was none of these things. It said 10 o'clock. The satsang started punctually on the dot at 10 a.m. There were no big crowds. The place was very clean. And what was being talked about was not religion, but spirituality. There were no rituals, no ceremony, no dress code, nothing of that sort. So I was in for a surprise. So I really liked it. And I discovered that the satsangs were there almost every Sunday. So I started going almost every Sunday. And the satsangs were every Sunday. I started going almost every Sunday. And then I started reading books. There was a bookshop there. I started buying books. I read those books. And that is when I discovered what yoga is truly about. I had been doing the physical practices of yoga for about 20 years before I came to the ashram. In the early 1970s, I had started those. And like most people, I thought, well, that is what yoga is about. And the rest of it, that yoga is not only for the body, it is also for the mind, it is a spiritual discipline, and so on and so forth, is just icing on the cake. So, but basically, yoga is those physical practices. But it's only when I read the synthesis of yoga by Sri Aurobindo that I saw that yes, yoga can be a lifestyle as a whole, and how it can be a lifestyle, and how it can be a good stress buster. Now, that is what scientists were looking at when they were searching for good lifestyle, healthy lifestyles in relation to chronic disease. And the two major things: a healthy lifestyle and potent ways of taking care of mental stress. So I saw how yoga could be both after reading Sri Aurobindo's synthesis of yoga. And then again, as a coincidence, one or two other books came in my hand at that time. One of them was Bernie Siegel's book, Peace, Love, and Healing, where he talked about the spiritual approach to cancer and so on. So, that led, and Norman Cousins' book, The Anatomy of an Illness, where he talked about the mind body relationship. So, all this happened in quick succession. So, the result was that by the year 2000, uh, I could see clearly a convergence between my personal life and professional life. So, on the personal side, I had gone into the depths of yoga to some extent after reading Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And in my professional life, I could see that basically what science is looking at is a combination of a healthy lifestyle and some way of overcoming mental stress. And here we have this combination and how yoga can be that. So I ended up being instrumental in establishing at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences a patient care facility, which we called Integral Health Clinic, for providing lifestyle modification courses based on yoga, in tune with the latest advances in mind body medicine. So, we were using yoga as a mind body approach as a tool in modern medicine, with the way some other pioneers had in the West primarily had done. So, I think this, at least in India, became the first place where we brought in yoga as much more than just a set of physical practices. We brought it into mainstream medicine, and that too at AIMS New Delhi. And that too in the Department of Physiology, which didn't really have patients, which had only uh, teaching and research going on, no patient care, and the research was mostly on animals, except a few eccentric people like me who were working on human beings. So that way, it was a sort of first of its kind physiology department receiving patients. It was something unheard of. Even journalists started calling me, "Have you taken the permission of the clinics committee of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences?" and so on. How can you have a clinic in the department of physiology? We call it integral health clinic. Now, if the divine will is behind supporting you, you overcome all obstacles. And how it was possible was because the director at that time, Professor P.K. Dave, he was very favorably inclined to yoga, and he agreed to inaugurate the clinic. So when this journalist called me, I told her, I don't know what the clinic's committee is, but the director is going to inaugurate the clinic. She had nothing more to say. So, that's how the divine will prevails. And it was sort of a shortcut. I knew later on that there was a clinics committee, in fact, which had to approve any new clinic coming up. But even shortcuts open up once the divine will is there. The director never told me about it. When I told him, he was all supportive of yoga, so he supported me all the way through. And so that's how, in one corner of the physiology department, we had an integral health clinic where healthy people as well as patients started coming, healthy people for prevention of disease and patients for management. But then we took care not to interfere with the drugs that they were taking. That we told them, your physician will decide, and we'll neither prescribe any drugs nor will we stop any drugs. But if you, as a result of this lifestyle approach, you start improving, then maybe the physician will reduce the dose of your antihypertensive medicine and maybe eventually take you off medication. Maybe the physician will reduce your dose for anti-diabetic medication. So all that is likely to happen, but that the physician will do. So with that, we started that clinic. So as you can see, I was firstly not a usual doctor. I was only into teaching and research. But then how from there to human research on nutrition, and from human research on nutrition to this patient care facility, I gradually started moving in a direction which took me in there. And therefore, it was sort of a natural extension. And then that clinic started in the year 2000. By 2005, started feeling that that place has a momentum of its own. Whether I'm there or not, it will continue, and it is continuing. It is there even today. That clinic continues to be there, so it will continue. Why should I spend more time in this institute on administrative work and attending committee meetings, spending so little time on what I actually enjoy doing? So I took early retirement at the age of 58, and soon after that, I moved to the ashram. So that, in short, has been the journey, which looks strange to people. How did this doctor trained in modern scientific medicine and who was serving patients suddenly decide to turn to yoga and spirituality? So it actually happened in spite of my not being treating patients. And maybe that is why it happened, because uh, I had more time for reading, writing, reflection, which clinicians generally don't have. And a clinician can't spend with his patients as much time as this approach needs. Because when we started this clinic, we had a 9-day course. The patients had to come for 9 days. Now you'll say, why does this lifestyle modification take so much time? Because you can give it even in 10 minutes. You can tell the person, eat this, don't eat this. Take some exercise for at least 45 minutes a day. Stop smoking and drinking, and don't worry about anything. The lifestyle advice is over. But then, does it have any effect? No. Very soon, the patient is back to square one, his own lifestyle, and he finds it much easier to swallow a few pills and sometimes even undergo a bypass surgery rather than make an extensive change in the lifestyle. It's only when you, over a period of 9 days at least, I mean, 9 days is also a short period, but at least you show the person that here's not an exchanging of an interesting and pleasant lifestyle for an unpleasant lifestyle. Here is a lifestyle which you'll find much more pleasant and at the same time healthy, because you're fitting it into a certain philosophy of life. So you'll start living that healthy lifestyle not because you have to for the sake of living a little longer, but you'll follow that healthy lifestyle because you want to, because you'll start finding it much more enjoyable than the lifestyle that you have been living. So that you could approach, that shift in that approach an attitude he can bring about only if you have the person available for 2 to 3 hours a day for 9 days, over which he has just some physical practice. He listen to a lecture, he may watch a video film, and he has a time for talking to you one on one in a counseling session. So all that we were doing for 9 days. Now, when he has that, then only he starts getting a hang of this approach, and then you can hope that probably he'll actually make a change in the lifestyle. So, and the clinicians don't have that much time. The clinician can't spend with a small group of patients 9 days, 2 to 3 hours every day. So,
Mm.
being in the physiology department, that luxury was available because we didn't have otherwise any other responsibility of patient care. So, it fitted very well.
So what I felt from hearing this was, uh, we all we all aspire to have our inner beliefs and practices that to converge with the way we express ourselves in the world. So you have been able to attain that in a harmonious fashion and in a divinely guided way. So that sounded really inspiring to me. But what I was wondering was, ever since you adopted this yogic way of life, how has your personal approach and your beliefs and practices in approaching the daily life changed?
Well, there have been changes. To some extent, maybe I was practicing yoga unconsciously, even before I learned anything about yoga. That was sort of inherent. Living a relatively simple life, trying to remain physically active, eat healthy food, eat more for health than for taste. So some of these things I already had. But then after I started these physical practices of yoga, one small element of yoga came in that I started when I was in my 20s. And then after that, uh, another 20 years later, I discovered the other aspects of yogas. And to that also, I took as a fish takes to water because it was sort of ingrained, although I was not looking upon it as yoga. So that way it was not. But all the same, doing it consciously did make a difference. It brought it in a bigger way. And one of the remarkable things it achieved was that when I came to the ashram during a difficult phase in life, I was under quite a bit of stress. Not only that problem became easy for me to handle, I got a handle on all the future problems. I mean, I suddenly became conscious that my sense of well being or my happiness does not have to be dependent on external circumstances. It can be completely independent of external circumstances. So, to find that source of joy within and not be dependent on external circumstances, be it possessions, things, food, or people, how people are behaving with me, none of these things seemed to matter. So that, not that I could practice it 100%, but at least I knew that it is possible to be happy completely independent of external circumstances. That is one difference it made. So my stress levels went down. So not only that problem eased out, now I could handle any other problem in future which could potentially cause mental stress. So that was one of the biggest gains. And this has shown up in my uh, health. uh, I became more normal in my weight. I had put on some weight when I was under stress. This is one of the things which happens to a lot of people under stress. And they tend to put on weight because one of the ways they beat the stress is by eating a little more. That is one thing. And another thing is that there's a biochemical mechanism. When you're under stress, you secrete steroids. And steroids also make you put on weight. I mean, not as much as a person who is on steroids as a drug, but even the small amount of extra steroids that are released in the body, they do lead to some gain in weight. So I had put on weight, I lost weight. My blood cholesterol levels had touched around 300. They came down. My uh, prostate size, that went down instead of further increasing at a certain stage. So all those things I have seen happening in my body. My eyesight has improved, even with half-hearted practice of some eye exercises, which are a part of yogic practices. So I've seen that on the whole, sometimes I feel healthier and more energetic today at the age of 76 than I felt 30 years ago at the age of 46. 46 was that peak period when I was under stress, and all this had happened.
Mhm. Uh, Learning how to be happy on our own, or how to manage our emotional or any sort of reaction or interaction with another person without that being driven by what the external circumstances or what happened, rather than it coming from within us. That is something even I have been trying to practice, but I at times I have to admit that it is very difficult. But I hope that we all can actually reach a stage where we can interact with people from within our truth, and not based on what external circumstances or drive us to react. So from your
Sure. When you
experience.
say that it's difficult for you, you have plenty of company. Even I find it difficult, even today. But once you know that what is possible and uh,
Yeah.
you at least can make an effort, then you can manage it yourself. You don't have to need to go to a counselor. You know
We
how
have
to counsel yourself.
after
And if
this.
you have to go to a counselor, then people will say that if you have to go to a counselor, then how can you counsel others?
True.
Maybe I'll
That,
share a joke with you here along the same lines. There was
yeah.
once Swami Anubhavanand speaking. He's a disciple of Swami Chinmayananda. He was once speaking in a satsang, and he said, suppose somebody is selling hair oil and tells people that this hair oil is so good that if a bald person applies it on his head, hair will start growing, hair will grow even on a stone. Now, Swami Anubhavanand himself is bald. So he said, if I start selling this type of a hair oil, people will first ask me, how about this stone? So,
That's
if you
true.
can't practice it yourself, how can you do it for others?
So I remember from one of the instance that I was very much stressed about a particular thing. I'm sharing this with Shania also. So I just shared with Bijlani sir that how am I going to? There was some kind of event that we were planning to have. So I just told him what we are going to do, how I am going to say. So he just said to me that don't take life so seriously. So I just keep on reminding. So it's a personal note for me and Shania that we need to take life so seriously every time, right?
Yeah, practicing not to try to get caught up in my own head, but rather, relate to people consciously, mindfully with what is happening in the present. So yeah, we are learning. So so I wanted to ask you, sir, what from your experience, how would you define yoga, or what according to you is yoga?
Well, I will turn to Sri Aurobindo for this. Uh, One of the ways he defines yoga is as a methodized effort towards self perfection with the ultimate aim of union with the divine. I think this is a very comprehensive and broad definition of yoga, a methodized effort, which means certainly you have to make some effort, although ultimately divine grace is what does the most. But to earn that grace, personal effort is important. And this effort is methodized, which means it's not haphazard effort. There's a certain system about it. What method you follow, that can vary from individual to individual, but there is a certain method to the madness, if you may call it, which is necessary. Uh, and sometimes I give an example to illustrate why method is necessary and how it can uh, make our efforts more potent. If we have in the kitchen a pot in which some water is boiling, steam will be escaping and will be doing nothing much. The steam will not be able to accomplish anything. But the same steam, if it is trapped in a pressure cooker, it can cook your meal much faster. And if it is a part of a steam engine, it can pull a whole train. Now, steam remains the same. It's because you have used a certain method, a certain technology, a certain technique which potentiates the power of steam. So that's how our efforts can be more meaningful if there's a certain method about it. So it's a methodized effort in yoga. Methodized effort aimed at self-perfection which takes us towards self-perfection, which means that it's a stepwise process. The goal may be self-perfection, but then it's not a one-time event, it's a process. So that is and the direction is towards self-perfection. And what are the units of which self-perfection would made? Units would be self-improvement. And improvement, we know, once we improve a little bit, there's always scope for further improvement, which means that eventually we'll find there's still more work to do, and the direction will be towards self-perfection. And with the ultimatum of union with the divine. Now, why I put that? For many reasons, but firstly, perfection itself. By very definition, human beings are imperfect, only God is perfect. So, which means any movement towards self perfection is trying to achieve some sort of an identity with the divine, and that can be called union with the divine. But then God enters, or the divine enters yoga in other ways also. because firstly, our own effort is not enough. Divine grace is necessary. And once we realize that, then that leads to a sense of reliance on the divine and a surrender to the divine. Then we are not anxious about our progress. So it takes anxiety away from the effort. And that is another way in which the divine enters, not only as the goal, but also as a part of the process. Because we know that to earn grace, and it is eventually grace that will do it. And I can't bring the goal any nearer to me by being anxious. That goal can be left to the divine. The divine knows best when I'll be the goal in this life or in subsequent life. That is left to the divine. So, that sense of surrender comes, that acceptance comes only because you believe in the divine. Because some people ask that can yoga be practiced without faith in God? I said, yes, it can be done. You can just look at it as a process that takes a person towards self perfection. That does not need the intervention of God. But then you are entirely on your own. And that may create in you a lot of anxiety. When will I become perfect? So that anxiety is taken away because you have grace available and you believe in that grace, and therefore you can surrender to the divine who is showering that grace on you. So that is how it helps. So because then you know that your own feeble efforts will not be enough, and you do need that. But then you can, it's not that divine grace is not available to those who do not believe in God. Divine grace is available to everybody, but we don't but we have to be open to it. If you don't believe in God, then you are not open to what is all around you. It is available, but we are not open to it.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, I need some time to think about it, but I know this is something that we actually need to think and incorporate in our lives. And what I wanted, and as part of your medical profession, like, you have also engaged in extensive research and on the impact of diet on health, as you mentioned. And your first book was Eating Scientifically, which was a popular book on nutrition. So, do you think there is like a correlation between the nourishing effects of food and mindfulness or mindful eating habits?
Yes, I think that question I can answer very easily and very briefly. Uh, the first book was on nutrition, but it was not a popular book. It was a book on popular science.
Okay, okay,
Although, I mean, it was published by a good publisher, Orient Longman. Uh,
okay.
so uh, the book uh, they gave up after about 10 years because they couldn't sell all the 2,000 copies that they had printed. They still had more than 1,000 copies left after 10 years. So that way it didn't become very popular. But for me, it was a good experience. But then I ended up writing another book on nutrition, a popular book once again, 38 years later. That book was published in, the first one was published in 1974. The second one was published in 2012 by Rupa Books. And the second book, the title of the second book is on that subject is Eating Wisely and Well. Now, the shift in the title itself tells you the shift in my approach. The first one was Eating Scientifically, because at that time I thought if you eat scientifically, that is enough. I mean, depending on whatever modern science tells you about nutrition, if you follow that advice, then that should be enough. But then I realized that that is not enough, because modern science basically talks about what to eat and how much to eat. But there's more to nutrition, and that is, or the nourishing effects of food, as you very nicely put. The nourishing effects of food depend not only upon what you eat and how much you eat, but also on how you eat. It is on how you eat that a lot depends. And as you said, eating mindfully is a part of how we eat. And that is what makes eating wisely and well quite different from eating scientifically. So, I mean, once again, I mean, you say didn't expand at all. Expanding a little would mean that how to eat should involve firstly mindful eating, which means when you are eating, you are just eating and relishing, eating with a sense of gratitude, which means not reading the newspaper or looking at the phone while you are eating, and also participating in an animated conversation. As far as possible, eat in silence, but if not, at least the focus should be on eating, and that should not be lost. So, first is eating mindfully, and secondly, one can incorporate a little bit of a ritual into it, in the sense that one can start eating with a prayer and stop eating with a prayer. And some of the elements of that prayer could be firstly gratitude, not only for the food, but also for the ability to digest and utilize the food, because that is also a divine mechanism. I mean, a scientist who understands how food is digested starts wondering how much of orchestrated activity is involved in the body to even digest that food, and it's nothing short of a miracle. Which is, it's not really a miracle, because all these miracles are normal for the divine who has designed these mechanisms. But all the same, uh, there are so many people who have plenty of food available but can't eat because they can't digest it. They have to be fed through a tube, or they have to be fed intravenously. You see them in hospitals. Or on a smaller scale, they eat food but digest very not enough of it, so much of it is going out as a waste. So then a diabetic cannot utilize the food properly. So being able to eat is and utilize is itself also something which calls for gratitude. Then reminding ourselves, why am I eating? Am I eating only because it is enjoyable? Certainly, that should not be the motive. It's, if it gives enjoyment, it's not a sin. But at the same time, that is not the primary motive. Then, am I eating it to only keep myself healthy? That's just a better reason. But all the same, that is not the only reason. That becomes a means to a higher end. If I'm healthy, then I can do what I'm in the world for much better, because the basic instruments are the mind and the body, the mind body complex. To keep it in good health, food is one of the important requirements. And if we eat wisely and well, then the food will give us that health, that fitness, which is required for the work for which I am here in this world. So it is not, one can't take the attitude in yoga that, well, I want to uh, eat and be merry. So if I enjoy something, I will eat it even if it is unhealthy. If I live 10 years less, I don't mind, but I want to enjoy life, my business. You can't take that attitude, because from the spiritual angle, we are here for a purpose. And that purpose needs a good, efficient mind body complex. And therefore, to take care of that equipment which we have been given, it is a equipment that we have got for a certain purpose. So take good care of that. It is a sacred duty. I can't take the attitude, it's my body, my business.
True, true.
So that is eating, consciously and mindfully,
Thank
which makes a lot of difference to how much we can get from food. And that's why, sometimes when people get very finicky about food, what is good, what is bad, what is healthy, what is unhealthy, and how many chemicals are there in the food these days, they worry about 100 things. But then quite a bit of it will not matter if one eats mindfully, because the body has a lot of resilience. I'm not saying that one should not think of those things, but only in moderation. Beyond a certain point, it becomes an obsession.
you.
And the daughter of the founder of Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, Tara Didi, she often tells us that when they were children in the ashram in Pondicherry, food was very simple. The mother didn't have much money to get any elaborate food or anything. So we didn't even think of what nutrition is about, what is good for health. And still, whatever we ate, we were so energetic on it. We played games and we were physically so active. She's physically active even now, even at the age of 87. So we were physically so active, we were doing so much sports and everything. Nothing happened. We never fell ill. And we were not even thinking what we were eating. We were eating such simple food. So, a lot of these physical factors, if you make some mistakes even with these physical factors, they can be overcome by appropriate attitude. Mind is over body, it's mind over body here.
Mm, true. Thank you for that. So, you have also been practicing yoga for a few decades now, and you have certainly met several people during this journey. So, throughout your experience, have you noticed any significant changes in people's approach towards yoga, and if so, how has it evolved?
Well, let me say one thing in which it has not changed much, and that is yoga was looked upon as a set of physical practices. People mostly tend to look at it as a set of physical practices even now. But the way it has changed is it has become more acceptable, it has become fashionable, it has become the in thing.
Mm.
Those days it was looked upon an antique, obsolete, out of date practice, and something which was irrelevant to the modern world. And when one talked about the spiritual aspects of yoga, they thought they were even ashamed to admit that when they have inherited this as a part of their heritage. On this there was, and there are a few lines by Dean Ornish, who was one of the pioneers in um, bringing yoga into the treatment of heart disease, and he did it in the 1970s. And he looked at yoga not as a set of physical practice in a very comprehensive way. He writes in that book that when he came to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in the early stages of his career, when he had just started this yogic interventions
Mm.
and was talking to the physicians of AIMS New Delhi, the impression that he got was that he was talking to them about their illegitimate child. You know, Indians, educated Indians, didn't like to sort of admit that this spiritual approach to yoga was a part of their heritage. They might be using it privately in their lives, but in public, they try to pose as hardcore scientists who will believe only in scientific evidence which has been generated, even if it has been generated on mice and rabbits in a laboratory. That was more valuable to them than what has been shown for ages on human beings. That was the type of approach they had. So that's what he likes. But then that has changed. And that has happened particularly in the last if, few years, uh, when the government of India has been sort of had made a concerted efforts to evoke that sense of national pride, which includes feeling proud of our heritage, including the yogic heritage, and that has had an impact today. Now, and of course, to some extent, it has become popular in the West. That also affects us because we get easily influenced by what is happening in the West. So both because what is happening in the West, the International Day of Yoga being declared in 2014, and the all sort of efforts being made to sort of evoke in us the sense of national pride. That has all helped in changing the picture of yoga.
Yeah, that's very true. So, one of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals involves good health and well-being, as we know. So, and that goal is both, healthy nutrition, and yoga aids this goal. So, along with these psychophysical aspects, what role do you think, spirituality plays in an individual's holistic growth?
Uh, well, I mean, spirituality is something which is holistic. Spirituality is put into practice is yoga. So the two can't be separated because the proper practice of yoga, what is visible in yoga, becomes enjoyable and meaningful only if it has a spiritual basis. And it leads to a change in the person, which we call spiritual growth, because now the person is becoming more and more aware of the all pervasive spirit of the divine. So that is the basis of this word spirituality as well as spiritual growth. So the practice of yoga in its comprehensive way cannot be really split from or separated from spirituality.
Okay. So, and do you think there is a connection between spirituality and sustainability?
Sure, there is a because essentially sort of a spiritual life becomes a simple life, uh, and becomes simple not because the person is trying to give up something and attaching a great value to being uncomfortable. The person is giving up many things because actually it should be proper to call it not giving up. Many things are dropping out of his life. Things which are considered very important, interesting, amusing, entertaining, enjoyable, pleasurable by most people, these things don't interest this person anymore. And that's how his life is getting simpler. And a simple life is what makes for sustainability.
That's that's very true. So this is all that I had to ask for now, and thank you so much, sir, for sharing your wisdom. And I don't have any immediate responses to give right now because these are things which I think we have to think through, and these aren't immediately to be reacted upon or responded to. I want to actually take in what I have heard because this has really been a learning session for me too, and it's not just another interview. It has been a really good learning session for me. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity because that's how I fulfill the purpose of my life by sharing whatever little I know. or have learned in all these
Honored
years.
to have
Thank you.
had this
Thank
conversation
you.
with
Thank you so much,